The quiet weight you carry after winning something small, a debate, a board game, an argument that didn't need to be fought and still feeling strangely empty, like the air left the room before you could enjoy it. That feeling has a name and a story behind it. You've probably met someone like this, or perhaps you are someone like this. The person who turns a casual game night into something tense. The one who can't let a comment go unanswered, who needs the last word the way some people need their morning coffee, not because they're greedy for it, but because something inside them goes quiet without it. Not stubbornness. It's survival dressed up as preference. Here's the strange part. Winning for these people rarely feels like joy, it feels like relief. A short exhale before the next exhale-worthy threat appears. Psychologists call this contingent self-worth, when your sense of being okay isn't something you simply have, but something you have to keep earning, match after match, conversation after conversation. Your worth becomes a subscription that's always about to expire. Maybe you've felt this without naming it. That tightness in your chest when someone disagrees with you in a meeting, as if their different opinion is a verdict on your entire character. That's not arrogance. It's a nervous system that has learned somewhere along the way that being wrong is dangerous. Not embarrassing, dangerous. The brain doesn't always know the difference between social defeat and physical threat, and so it reacts the same way it would to a predator. Heart rate climbs, thoughts narrow. The need to win stops being a desire and becomes something closer to defense. There's a quiet question worth sitting with here. When was the last time you let yourself lose at something small just to see who you'd be without the win, not who you'd become, who you already are underneath the performance? To understand why winning can feel like oxygen to some people, you have to go back further than the argument, further than the game. You have to go back to childhood, to the small rooms where love first got measured. For some people, affection wasn't unconditional. It came after the good grade, the clean room, the trophy on the shelf. Psychologists studying attachment theory have long noted that when love is inconsistent or conditional, children don't conclude that love is unreliable, they conclude that they must have done something to deserve more of it. So they perform, they achieve, they win, not because winning feels good, but because losing once felt like disappearing from someone's attention entirely. This is the part that asks for gentleness rather than judgment. The person who needs to win the argument at dinner isn't trying to dominate you. They are, in some quiet, unspoken layer of themselves, still trying to prove they're allowed to take up space. Not control. It's an old kind of fear wearing the costume of confidence. And yet, and this is where it gets layered, not everyone who loves winning is operating from fear. Some people simply enjoy mastery, the clean satisfaction of skill meeting challenge. Psychology draws a careful line between healthy competitiveness and what's sometimes called ego-involved competitiveness. The first is rooted in growth, you compete against the version of yourself from yesterday. The second is rooted in threat, you compete against the fear that you might not be enough today. Same behavior on the outside, entirely different worlds on the inside. Here's where dopamine enters the picture, and it deserves explaining rather than just naming because it's often misunderstood. Dopamine isn't the chemical of pleasure, not exactly. It's the chemical of anticipation, the rise before the reward, not the reward itself. This is why winning rarely satisfies for long. The dopamine spike happens in the chase, in the moments right before victory, and once the win is secured, the brain is already quietly scanning for the next thing to chase. Not because the person is ungrateful. Because their nervous system was never built to rest in success, only to seek it. This creates a particular kind of exhaustion that's rarely spoken about. Imagine, no, don't imagine, simply notice how tiring it must be to live in a world where every interaction is a scoreboard, every conversation a possible loss, every silence a place where someone else might be winning instead of you. That's not living. That's a long, quiet war with no ceasefire. There's a concept in psychology called locus of control, and it explains something tender about all of this. People with an external locus of control believe their worth and safety depend on outside outcomes, winning, being right, being chosen. People with a more internal locus of control still care about outcomes, but their sense of self doesn't rise and fall with them. The difference isn't ambition, it's where the ground is. One person stands on shifting sand that moves with every result. The other stands on something steadier, something that doesn't crack just because they lost a game of cards on a Tuesday night. Maybe you've noticed this in yourself in smaller, quieter ways. Not the dramatic need to win every argument, but something subtler, checking how many likes a post received, comparing your year to someone else's highlight reel, feeling a tiny flinch when a friend's life looks easier than yours. That flinch has the same root, not jealousy. It's an old alarm system mistaking someone else's joy for your own threat. This is where cognitive dissonance quietly enters too. It's the discomfort that arises when two truths sit side by side and refuse to agree. For instance, I need to win to feel okay, and winning never actually makes me feel okay for long. Rather than face that uncomfortable gap, the mind often does something clever and exhausting. It convinces itself the next win will be different. The next achievement will finally be the one that settles things. It rarely is. Not because the person is broken, but because the goalpost was never really about winning. It was about safety, and no scoreboard has ever been able to hand someone safety. There's a softer truth hiding beneath all of this, one that's easy to miss if you're only looking at the surface behavior. The person who always needs to win is often the person who, somewhere quiet and unspoken, doesn't yet believe they're allowed to simply exist without justifying it. Their worth feels rented, not owned. And so they keep paying the rent in trophies, in arguments won, in being the one who's right. Ask yourself gently without judgment, is there a part of you that only feels solid when you're succeeding at something? And what happens to that part of you in the quiet hours when there's nothing left to win? It's worth saying clearly here, none of this makes a person broken or cold or manipulative. It makes them human, shaped by a history they didn't choose, responding to old wounds with the only tools they had at the time. A child who learns that achievement equals safety isn't being dramatic, they're being resourceful. The tragedy isn't that they adapted. The tragedy is that the adaptation outlived its purpose, and nobody ever told them it was safe to put it down. There's a particular kind of loneliness that lives inside constant competition, one that rarely gets spoken about because it doesn't look like loneliness from the outside. It looks like success. It looks like being the loudest voice in the room, the sharpest mind at the table, the one who always somehow comes out ahead. But underneath that, there's often a quiet ache, because winning doesn't connect you to people. It separates you from them just slightly every single time, not closeness. It's distance dressed in applause. Contrast that with what actual security feels like, the kind that doesn't depend on outcomes. It's quieter, almost boring in the best way. It's losing a game and laughing about it 10 minutes later. It's being wrong in a conversation and feeling curious instead of crushed. Not victory. It's peace, the kind that doesn't need an audience to confirm it's real. This is perhaps the most overlooked part of the psychology of winning, the relationship between competition and self-compassion. People who struggle with self-compassion often substitute it with achievement, because achievement is measurable and self-worth, on its own, can feel like fog you can't hold on to. Winning becomes proof. But proof is a strange foundation to build a life on because it requires constant renewal. Self-compassion, on the other hand, doesn't need renewal, it simply needs permission. There's a particular phrase researchers sometimes use, ego depletion, to describe the exhaustion that comes from constantly regulating yourself to appear capable, composed, victorious. It's a tiredness that doesn't go away with sleep, because it isn't physical. It's the fatigue of performing okayness instead of resting in it. People who always need to win often carry this fatigue quietly, smiling through it, because rest to them can feel like falling behind. Not relaxation, it feels like risk. And maybe this is the moment to soften the lens even further, because there's nuance worth honoring here. Not every act of competitiveness comes from wounding. Some people grew up in environments where effort was celebrated more than outcome, where trying hard and engaging fully with life simply became part of their nature, not a defense but a delight. For them, winning is play. Losing is also play. The stakes feel light because their identity was never tethered to the score in the first place. This is worth naming because psychology should never flatten people into one single explanation. Some people compete because they're afraid. Others compete because they're alive, curious, engaged, and the world simply feels more vivid with a little friction in it. The difference often reveals itself in a single moment, how someone reacts to losing. Fear-based competitiveness collapses into shame, defensiveness, or quiet withdrawal. Play-based competitiveness shrugs, laughs, maybe even feels a flicker of respect for whoever won instead. Same scoreboard, two entirely different inner worlds. If you recognize the fear-based version in yourself, there's no need to rush toward fixing it, as if even healing has to be a competition too. Awareness moves slower than that and gentler. It often starts with noticing, really noticing, the exact moment your body tightens before a possible loss, not analyzing it, just noticing the way you'd notice whether changing outside a window. There's a kind of healing that happens not through winning differently, but through losing safely, through letting a friend be right without feeling smaller for it, through finishing second and discovering, almost to your own surprise, that the sky didn't fall. Each of these small moments quietly rewires an old belief, the belief that your value was always up for renegotiation. Not collapse, It's recalibration, slow and patient, like a compass finding north again after years of pointing toward approval instead. It helps, too, to remember that the people you most admire for their groundedness are rarely the ones who win the most. They're the ones who seem least disturbed by losing. There's a stillness in them, a kind of quiet permission they've given themselves to simply be, regardless of outcome. Not because they don't care. They care deeply, they've just stopped confusing caring with needing to control the result. Maybe that's the real shift hidden inside all of this. Caring about something and needing to win at it are not the same emotion, even though they often wear the same face. You can care about a relationship without needing to win every disagreement inside it. You can care about your work without needing to be the best in every room you enter. The caring stays. Only the grip loosens. There's something almost tender about realizing this, that the constant need to win was never really about the games or the arguments or the comparisons. It was about a much older question, asked quietly by a much younger version of you. Am I enough even when I'm not winning? And for a long time, the only answer available was to keep winning, just to avoid finding out. But here's a small, quiet truth worth carrying forward, not as a lesson, but as a kind of company. You were never actually being measured the way you feared you were. Not by the scoreboard, not by the room, not even by the people whose approval once felt like oxygen. The scoring was happening inside you the whole time, and only you have ever had the authority to stop counting. There's a hum that exists in rooms where nobody is trying to win anything, quiet conversations, slow mornings, moments where being right doesn't matter because being present matters more. That hum is available to you too, whenever you're ready to stop performing safety and start simply living it. And maybe that's where this settles, not with an answer, not with advice, but with a small, lingering thought you can carry into whatever room you enter next. The version of you that doesn't need to win anything is not a weaker version of you. It's the version that was always safe enough to lose and somehow never knew it.